The most interesting thing I find absolutely extraordinary was this Archer Milton Huntingdon, the man who actually created this extraordinary collection of work. He was born in 1870 and he died in 1955. Now, interestingly, his money came from the railway. His father was involved with the first railway in America. And one of the things that happened to him is that he was very, very closely involved with his mother. And his mother had possibly Spanish background, but she was interested in things of Spain. And masses of money. They took the child, aged 9, to London. And he read, whilst he was in London, George Burroughs' book about Spanish gypsies. And from then on, this little boy suddenly got this mad passion for Spain and gypsies. And when he came back to America, he insisted on having Spanish lessons and so on. And eventually, he told his father, well, of course, when he was old enough to go to university, he took a law degree. But he told his father that what he wanted to do more than anything else was to understand the Spanish history, and to create the Hispanic society, which in fact he did. His father died in 1900, leaving him with an enormous amount of money, and this is precisely what he did. Now, if we put the first one on, you can see where it is. What is so fascinating is I've asked everybody who lived it for a long time in New York and who knew New York, and I've only met one person who has ever visited the museum, which, as you can see, is right at the top here, Washington Heights. I've got this map on because I wanted to show you exactly where it was.
Central Park.
There's Central Park, and there you see is Harlem, and here is a
memorial.
Memorial site, and this is Spanish Harlem. Now, the problem about this area is that when he bought an enormous amount of money, spent an enormous amount of money and bought a lot of space in this area, because he was hoping that it would become the sort of the museum center of America. And we're talking about 1890s, that sort of time. And at the time, it was sort of country. It was actually where the naturalist Audubon lived, and he bought the whole area up. And now this area is on East 156, no, West 155th Street and 156th Street. And it is right there it is. You see Washington Heights right at the top there.
There's Audubon Terrace.
Yes, there's Audubon Terrace, and that's what it is. And it's still very beautiful. The problem is that I read a very interesting article in the New York Times, which said the problem was that although it's in Spanish Harlem, the Spanish group never, ever, ever go to it. In fact, when the man who was writing the article said that he was the only person in the place, and it's very, very sad. And so they were so concerned about this that eventually they had a new group of trustees, and the head of the Metropolitan, the old head of Metropolitan, became one of the trustees. And what they did is they rebuilt, which they're doing now. They rebuilt a sort of a building which had been sort of this building here, which
like a new wing,
really. And they're hopefully now going to make it a place where young people, particularly young Hispanic people, can show their work, so one of the reasons we've got this exhibition is because they're rebuilding. But I put this on because I wanted to show you what a large and important building it was. It was actually built by designed by his cousin, who was Charles Huntington, and his second wife was a sculptress, and this big sculpture is Elsita at the front here, and the whole of the front is full of her sculpture. Let's put
And
the
that's
ne-
him
That's
there at
him,
the
of course.
bottom.
That's him at the bottom. Can we have the next one? And we can. Now, I wanted to show you this one on the left because it's an early photograph. It's a photograph in 1909 of Broad Street, and the entrance is on the right to the museum, and the picture on the right is the same street now. It gives you an idea of what the change, and it is this was 1909, no, 1919, I said, so 1909 actually, and this is the same area. This is Spanish Harlem. Okay, let's put the next one on, and I'll give you an idea. Here it is. You see, it's really very splendid. It has this wonderful dark brown, dark red. Really. I gather it's a very, very, very dark red. And it is the only way. Oh, look what she's done.
Don't worry, it's she hasn't shut anything down.
Well, right. It is, as I say, the exhibition is very much like the V&A because it's absolutely full. When he started to collect, he was very interesting in his attitude to collection. He was very, very keen about Spanish history. And what he's really created is a sort of the glamorous time of Spain, this time when Spain was a sort of almost the most important country in the world. And it really, he stopped actually buying and being involved in about 1909. Now, this particular interior is, I gather, very much the same as it was to begin with, and at the top, eventually, we're going to look at the Sorolla rooms. He met Sorolla in England in 1909, and he commissioned him to do a huge mural, which is still there. Okay, next, and I'll show you the first. There it is. Now, this particular room, which is sort of something like 22 feet, it runs right the way around the building. And these murals are all about parts of Spain, you know, like areas of Spain. And he actually he actually met her in London in 1909, and he was so interested in his work. By this time, Sorolla had married, who himself had been, actually, he'd been educated in Paris. He'd had the Julian School and so on, but he was winning all sorts of prizes. He was terribly famous. And so Huntington offered him an exhibition in his newly built, because his building had only just been, 1906, it only just opened. And it says that it was quite extraordinary. Thousands and thousands of people came. I mean, and it was enormously successful. And Sorolla sold all sorts of paintings from it. But here's an example of it. We'll be talking about it afterwards in a way. But he did it he actually finished it. It's 230 feet long. It's quite extraordinary. And it's about the contemporary life. Now, because he was really showing basically the complete history of Spain, this is the first one. Is very, very interesting because these particular pots were found outside Seville, and a British archaeologist called George Bowler was there, and Huntington himself was on holiday at the time, and he sort of, you know, as a joke really, started to do a bit of archaeology. Didn't do very much, but he got terribly interested in what they found. And this particular stuff is quite extraordinary. It was excavated in 1896, and he bought it, and they're called there are 1900 BC is what they are on the left. And the other one is the Palance Hoard, which again was discovered near Seville, and this particular one is BC, and it's 1911. These jewelries is 1911, and the place, the exhibition is fascinating because of all this stuff. Let's have the next one, and I'll show you the next one. Now, this is fascinating. This is Roman, and it's a Roman lamp. It is quite extraordinary. It's a 1st century AD, and this was discovered in Morocco in Spain, and the mask relief is Pan, and it was a lamp. And of course, on the other one, you all recognize this. This is a Roman, but basically a Greek from the Greek, and it's Diana the Huntress. And this is probably AD 108. Now, what's fascinating about all of this stuff that we're seeing is that Huntington was very strange. He was so obsessed with Spain that he didn't want to divest Spain of any of its treasures. So he wouldn't buy directly from Spain. He bought actually from other collectors who were giving up their collection, all the Spanish stuff. So his stuff came from all over the place, but never directly from Spain, which I think is rather sweet. Now, the next one is absolutely gorgeous. And this is Mallorca. And this was actually found in Valencia, near where Sorolla lives. And this luxury plate, which is quite extraordinary with that amazing blue, is 1370. And they think it always hung on the wall because there's 2 little holes at the top. Now, the interesting thing about this is because it's an example of the influence of the Muslim potters who went into Spain at this time. And this particular, it's tin glazed earthenware. It's very difficult earthenware. And on the center, the same sort of thing. This particular, it may be a wall hanging, we're not entirely sure. But it's called the Alhambra silk. And on the right, there's a detail. And you can see the extraordinary complication of the detail. And the silks are quite amazing. He was fascinated, always fascinated with the sort of the development of Spain, and we see an enormous amount of that. I think Camilla's gone into the other room to take the cat away, I hope. I'm sorry about this. It's very messy this morning. Forgive me. Camilla, how do I change this? Now, this is really very important. This is particularly important. This is a man called Miguel, the painter was Miguel Alcanzas, but what I'm putting it on for, I want to show you international Gothic really. And this particular one, the one on the extreme right, this one here, is actually in the exhibition. And it is quite beautiful. It's on wood, and it's tempera, and and gold, of course, always. Now, this was part originally of an altarpiece, and I found the other examples from the same altarpiece. So you've got here the risen Christ here, and of course here you see the crucifix, and this is one of the saints. These are the 2 of the saints on the side, and this particular one again is 1422 to 30. It's really quite extraordinary. That's also in the exhibition, but this one I think is very sweet and very funny. It's wooden, and it's small, and it's medieval, of course. It's in polychrome wood, and it's St. Martin. And the interesting thing, a very popular saint was St. Martin. Now it appears that St. Martin was a sort of a Roman saint, and he was on his horse, and a beggar came by in terrible clothes, and the beggar had been attacked, and so he was in a bad state. And he got off his horse, he took off his cloak, and gave it to the beggar. And of course, surprise, surprise, the beggar turned out to be Christ. That I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. Now you have to realize that what we're looking at is the way that the Catholic Church is behaving like propaganda in Spain at this particular time, because the whole of the South America, they were worshipping all sorts of things, but they weren't Christian. And one thing that was determined, the Spanish people determined, was that they should be Christian. Now, the one on the right is really very, very rare. It's a Hebrew Bible. Now, this is very interesting, because this Bible, the person who bought it did not get it from Spain. He got it from Portugal, because the Jews were thrown out of Spain in the 16th century. And this particular one is 1450 to 97. It's illuminated manuscript. And as I say, it was taken to Portugal in 1496 when the Jews were expelled. But then, of course, they were expelled from Portugal. The poor creatures have been expelled from almost everywhere. But it's a beautiful piece of work, and you'd love it. Now, this is really fantastic. This is a 15th century map of the Mediterranean. And of course, it's on parchment. Now, look, there's you can see Italy. And here, around here, you can see the whole thing. It's absolutely lovely. This one is absolutely gorgeous.
Mediterranean.
It is Mediterranean, yes. And this is a 16th century map. But the one on the right is the next one is perhaps the most important. This is the Western Seaboard. And now, as Camilla's come back, I'm going to ask her to tell, because I know that this is South America. And I think this is Chile.
Technically, it's Central and South America.
But it is that
No,
Chile?
it is. No.
That's not Chile.
So this is the edge that we're focusing on.
Edge, yes.
And this is the westerly most edge of, the easterly edge of South America. And what they've done is they've kind of laid on its side Mexico. And you see this panhandle here, that is actually Florida. So you have here the Gulf of Mexico. Here's where you'd have like Texas.
I've never seen it.
Texas. And then you'd have Mexico kind of coming down here. And you'd have the Panama, is it the Panama Canal?
No,
Panama somewhere else. You'd have the canal kind of going through here, but that hasn't been built yet, obviously. And then you have all of those like French Guiana, et cetera, all here at the top. And then this is where Brazil, or actually we're probably a bit higher up, but Brazil would be sort of here. So they haven't even discovered Chile or any other.
No, not at this particular time.
No.
And it's a very, very important one. It's by Vespucci.
Amerigo Vespucci, yeah.
And he was Florentine, and it was made in 1527.
Mm-hmm.
Now they think that it was possibly was a gift to Charles V of Spain, because he was marrying a princess of Portugal at the time, and they think that it was a gift. They don't really know. But this one is really the most, in a way, it's just, in a sense, it tells us an awful lot about colonialism, because this particular one was sent back to Spain to Philip II, and this was from a Spanish holder of a place called the village, and it's like Tipacwich, It's in Mexico. It's a Mexican village. But what is so sad about it, what is so interesting about it is it shows the Spaniards beating the local people in this detail here. And this, as I say, was sent back. It was 1584, and it was sent back to Philip II. And this is what happened at the
It's
time.
like a pictorial account of
Isn't
the
it amazing?
conflict.
Amazing,
basically.
really. It's local, and they don't know, of course, who did it, but it's wonderful to see it. Okay, the next one. Now, this is so interesting. Now, this is a marvelous slide because this was taken by Camilla. This is a reel from the painting. And he's the governor of the Netherlands. And he's a savage Catholic. And he was the one who was the major who attacked the Protestants in the wars. And this is 1567-76. And it's Ferdinand Alvarez de Toledo. He was the third Duke of Alba. And this is 1506. And he died in 1582. So we're talking about the time when Spain, of course, owned at this particular time most of the world. Let's have the next one, because this is a very interesting one. This is a processional monstrance. What's this?
No, keep on going. Don't
This
worry.
is a processional monstrance. And this particular monstrance is important. I'm so irreligious that I sort of don't know these things, but in fact, it was very important. It was carried, again, it's propaganda. It was carried in procession as all the activities. It's very large, it's silver gilt, and inside it there's the wafer of bread. And of course, the wafer of bread is really Jesus Christ. And of course, it's for the Mass. And this is a very, very, very important one. And it was all, as I say, it was made by the Capuchins, actually. Again, it's 16th century.
And this isn't dyed, correct?
No.
This is actual stone,
Stone,
like actual lapis lazuli.
Lapis lazuli, it's beautiful. And this deep. The reason I put this one on is because of this lovely detail. You see how incredibly rich it was. It was very hard, and they would carry it in procession. This is I think this is really, very beautiful. I honestly did not know this artist at all, and I was tremendously impressed with him. It's Louis de Morales, Morales. He was born in 1510, he died in 1586. And of course, this is Ecce Homo. The one on the left is not in the exhibition, but I found it. I thought it was such a beautiful painting. It's Christ carrying the cross, and it's 1586. But the one in the exhibition is there in its frame, and it's such a good photograph, this one. And it's Behold the Man, and this is 1563-70. And it's extraordinarily. It was actually the favorite painter of Loyola, because it's incredibly. His work is incredibly sort of full of pathos, always on this very dark background. But the next one was the one that was the great excitement when it was bought. This is the El Greco. And to see the El Greco is quite wonderful. It is marvelous. It's the penitent St. Jerome. And St. Jerome was in fact a cardinal. So you see his cardinal's hat at the back, his cloak here. And of course, he's holding the crucifix. Now, interestingly, when he bought this, it was a new fashion for El Greco. El Greco, when he died, was virtually ignored. His work was not thought well of at all. But we're talking about the time of symbolism in France. Suddenly, he became immensely fashionable, and everybody began to sell their El Grecos. And this one was, I gather, the most expensive painting that he'd painted at this time. Look at it carefully, because look at all the symbolism. You see the skull, and the timepiece, and the book, and so on. It's all there. It's a beautiful painting. And that's lovely. That's there. Okay, next one. Now this was so extraordinary. I had to show you this one because it's a door knocker, but it's a door knocker of only the very, very wealthy. It's enormous, and it's got the head of a dragon, and it's early 17th century, and it's iron, and a noble house's door knocker. But on the right is one of the rarest pictures ever. This is incredibly rare. This is signed by El Greco on the back. It's on cardboard. It's a portrait of a man. It's 1600, and it's incredibly beautiful. It's very tiny.
It's a miniature. Yeah.
Tiny little thing. It's so beautiful. Okay, next one. Now these are very interesting. The top actually is a French potter. I put him on because it was this particular one the Frenchman was Bernard Palissy, and he died in 1590. And his particular method of glazing and using animals in the
pottery.
The awful thing they did is quite terrible. The animals were alive when they put them in the oven, when they put the clay over them. And yes, they were. They were real. They were real. It was awful. This is how they did it. This is Mexican. The Mexicans. This is a Mexican a sort of example of this, and this is 1650. And it's a place called Camila. And as I say, the creatures were often alive. And you see here a fish and a bird. And these are here, separate. They're very beautiful, a fish and a bird. But this is, as I say, 1560. Okay, next is they're extraordinary stuff. Now, this is a marvelous, this particular one's in the exhibition, but I found two more for you because they really were. They really are marvelous. This is Zurbrand. Again, at the time of Zurbrand's death, he was never considered very important. And so he didn't, actually, from what I've read about Huntingdon, it was, he didn't like to spend fortunes on pictures. In fact, he and his mother had a terrible fight about the Velasquez, which he finally bought. His mother had to pay half for it because he thought it was too expensive. But this one, so Zurbrand at that time, I suppose, was relatively cheap. Zurbrand's dates, by the way, of 1598 to 1664. He was a contemporary, of course, of Velasquez. But this one is here. Particularly look at the way he dealt with cloth. It's marvelous. She's Saint, I didn't know this saint, Saint Emma Terina. Now she was stoned to death, and so in her hand she's holding a stone. And she was again a very early saint. And Zurbrand is extremely influenced by Caravaggio. You can see this in the way that the light is striking. The one in the center is Saint Agatha, and they're her breast that she's holding in front of her because her torture was to cut off her breast.
Oh, good Lord.
Again, she was a Roman saint. And this she's holding her breast to show us all. And the other one is Saint Apollonia, and this is 1618. And she's the one that spread the word. This particular picture came from Mexico. Okay, next one.
Her torture was
yeah.
She's holding a pair of clamps
That's
with
right.
a tooth in it because her torture
was
all of her teeth being taken out.
They're
strangely sort of devoid of any violence, aren't they?
Yes, but look at the way he paints cloth. Isn't it extraordinary? Oh, this is the worth going to. This is one of the most touching and beautiful paintings in the exhibition. And it's Velasquez's very, very rare picture of a child who is not royal. They think it may be his granddaughter. It's 1638 to 42. They just don't know. So there are only 2 examples of non-royal pictures.
Do you want to take some water?
Yes, I do, I think now. And the other one is very important. This is the Velasquez. And this is Gaspard Guzman, Count Duke of Olivares. Now, he was master of the King's Horse, and he was the Netherlandish head, and he was the reason at the time of the 30 Years' War, he was the reason that they killed all the Protestants. He was very, very tough, this one. Philip IV was on the throne at the time. Isn't this beautiful, though, this
Her portrait.
gorgeous portrait? Now, these are thought that you see, the place is exactly like going to the V&A, if you see what I mean. You know, there are all this stuff, and in between, there are some paintings, but not masses of them. And this is all from Mexico. These are from Mexico. During Huntington's life, he spent a lot of time in Mexico, and he became very interested in the work because of it. And this is a vase, this particular Ormula Mount, and it was gold and copper. And again, it was made in Mexico, but was sent to Spain. It's 1640. And the second one is lacquer. And this particular lacquer was very difficult because it came from a tree, and it was extremely expensive and extremely difficult, and very, very. This is 1600, and this the gourd has got the same sort of lacquer on it, and it's again 17th century. Okay, next one. Now this is really very interesting. This particular painting, actually, it's St. Michael striking the rebellious angels, and it's Sebastiano Ortega. Now he actually took the idea. They say he took it from Rubens. It's a very famous Rubens picture. But the reason that it's very important is that it's actually on copper. It's the largest painting ever been done on copper. And they think the design came from Rubens originally. It's 1650 to 52. And it really is quite, as I say, his Lopez D-A-R-T-E-A-G-E-R. How do you say that in Spanish? Ortega? Ortega, that's him. Now the one in these two is Martin Fernandez Correa, and he was a civilian painter. And these trompe-l'oeils were on wood. And this one in the center is in the exhibition, and the one on the outside is not. And the thing that they're interested, they talk about this, of course, is a Dutch influence, but they really are quite extraordinary. Now, the one on the next is really, the next one is really interesting. Now, I keep reminding you that these pictures are not just religious pictures, but they are propaganda pictures. And one of the things that's very important is, you'll be glad to know that the Virgin was immaculate. And the one on the left is the most famous one by Guido Reni, which was copied by everybody else, and it's the Immaculate. It's the Immaculate Conception, this one here. And on the right, it was a copy by a man called Carrero de Morales, Spanish artist, and the particular one is 1670, and it's his version of the Immaculate Conception. Do look at the babies, all the way around the babies, sweet little babies around everything. This particular one became the most copied of all the pictures of the time. But of course, the idea of the Immaculate Conception was what was being pushed. Okay, next one. Now, this is very interesting. This lady, it's a lady.
Sorry, Pat. I don't know, giving everything away apparently.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
This is really, really, really important because it's a woman. She is these lovely little figures. She's Andrea Damina. Her father was a sculptor, and she lived opposite a nunnery, and so she became a nun. She was born in 1654 and she died in 1734.
And
Her
this is in
father was a
Spain?
sculptor. No, this was actually, this was in Mexico, I think.
Oh.
And she was, the interesting thing is she became a nun, but as the convent was opposite, on the opposite side of the road, they think when she was a nun, she went back and helped her father in sculpting, and these are hers. And I think this is of course a version here. But what is so interesting is it's a female perspective, and look at the anguish. This is a mother's anguish. It was signed and dated 1675. And the other one, of course, is Christ suffering, Ecce Homo. And they are really quite extraordinary. They're very beautiful. And they're both the same, roughly the same time. Now, we're still talking about South America, really, because on the next one, it's a tributary of the Amazon, and it's a detailed map. And he was a Jesuit missionary. He was Samuel Fitzherbert or something. He was 1728, and it's a trilogy. And it was first printed in 1707, and it's of the Amazon. It's one of the very, very earliest. This stuff is, you must take a time to look at this stuff. It's very, very beautiful. It's well put together, I think, don't you, Camilla? This part I thought was very good.
Well, to include like maps and things like that, it really brings to life the whole conquest, the whole process of colonization.
It was quite extraordinary, really. The next one is creepy. Oh,
because you and I both mentioned it was not only colonization but indoctrination.
Oh yes,
because everything had to do with
the church.
Pressure of religion.
The pressure of religion, no question about it.
It was always.
I mean, these are quite extraordinary. I mean, these really are. They think this man was called Manuel Chile, called Capicaro. It's 4 states of man, you'll be glad to know. This is what happens. This is when you go to purgatory. This is all to do with Catholic faith. This is the first one is the soul in hell, and the second one, he's in purgatory. These 2 are in purgatory, but the one on the end, you'll be glad to know, that's the soul in heaven. So if you go through all this ghastliness, you come out at the end and it's all lovely. And this is 1775. What we have to try to remember, and I'm only beginning to understand it myself, really, that this was very real to these people. I mean, life was short and difficult. And there was no doubt that you believed that if you did whatever it was the church said you weren't to do, you really would spend your eternity in fire and God knows what. And they truly believed it. Okay, now they still do, of course, in some places. These are the most extraordinary cameras, and these are so beautiful. This particular one is a writing cabinet of 1684. And it's this extraordinary lacquer. And it's actually made of boiling and chewing for some reason, these leaves to make this stuff. And they're sticky buds. They come from something called a groper tree. And this particular one was owned by the secretary to Charles II of Spain. And there is his coat of arms in the center. And I got it from the catalogue, but this is the real thing. This is Camilla's look at the detail. Look at the detail. Isn't it extraordinary? These are so interesting.
These were also, we noticed the mixture of cultures. There's a kind of culture clash between obviously depicting
Moorish
the New
stuff.
World, and then obviously the trying to imitate or use stylistic bits of
the contemporary stuff,
Mesoamerican culture. Like you think about the way that
strange clothes.
Well, no, I mean Mayan. You have like Mayan stones or Incan stones always depicting in profile, and so there's a kind of like strange taking from the.
I think they are
the First Nation.
They're really quite interesting. The next one is even more so. This particular one was made by the Jesuit missionaries, and this came from Mexico. No, Bolivia. Sorry, Bolivia. And the workshop was founded in 1691, but this is about 1760. And the one on the right is interesting for us in a strange way. It's a tray with chinchillas on, lions and birds and flowers. It's 1700 to 1750. It's silver gilt, and it was sold to by a noble Spaniard who bought it, surprisingly, from our Queen Charlotte's collection, the wife of George III. I thought that was interesting. I don't know why that came about. Okay, next one. But the other one, the next one here, is extraordinary. Now, this is a sort of local amateur artist. It's a book of daily life in Mexico. And this particular man, I believe, was a silversmith. And it's the 1760s. And this is sort of a day at the market. And it's 1763. It was Mexico City. And on the right, this incredible, and again, we thank Camilla for, this is a Mexican shawl. And I believe they still wear shawls like this. Mm-hmm. This is 1775 to 1800. The embroidery is extraordinary. It's very traditional Mexican garment, this one. Okay, next one. Now we come to some of the greatest stuff. And here we have lovely stuff for Goya. Now he's born in 1746 and he died in France in 1828. And these are a series of drawings incredibly rare because they're early and that they eventually are going to become the etching capriccios of the 1790s, but they think they're earlier than this. And they're basically a criticism of society. They're lovely, lovely drawings. And then we come to the great Goyas that we're going to see next. Now, these are fascinating. This on the left is Jose Alvarez de Toledo, who died in 1739. And this lady in white in the middle is his wife. This is the famous Duchess of Alba in a white dress. I found this one. She was 33 when it was painted. And it's the White Duchess. It was painted in 1795. Her husband is still alive. But what is interesting about this clothes is it's the clothes of the aristocracy. If you think of Gainsborough, it's the same sort of clothes that were worn at the same time. And I thought her little dog is absolutely lovely. He's a Beetle Frise, and that's the real thing. That's the real colour, because Camilla took that for her. You can see writing on that, you see, on the back of it. And this is this one man I think is very funny. He's called Manuel Lependa, and this is 1799. I just remind you that Goya's life was very strange because he started life as a sort of a court painter. He was a very fashionable painter of the aristocracy. And this particular man, for example, this Lependa man, was involved in the army. And what you see at the back of him is the barracks. And he was a sort of a friend and of the circle of the Duchess of Alba. And this particular picture is 1799. And they point out that you can hardly see it in the that the dust, the powder from his wig is on his shoulders, but you can't see that in this, and I can't really tell you. But the picture on the right I found, which I'm very pleased to have found, because this is by a man called Vincent Lopez Portana, and it's a portrait of Goya. And this is Goya painted in France, so it's just before he dies. I thought it would be very interesting for you to see this. It was painted in 1826. Okay, next one, and here we come to the great picture. Virtually, it's worth going to see the Black Duchess. It is quite remarkable. Now, this painting has had all sorts of articles written about it. I mean, I've got so many articles, I don't want to throw them away. I think I've got so many of them. And this is the Black Duchess. It was painted in 1797. Her husband had died 2 years before, and it was painted in her country estate. Now, what makes this picture so strange is that she's wearing the costume of the ordinary people. Now, this is the sort of Sunday dress of the ordinary people. This particular dress would have been worn for at times of processions and so like that. And she's wearing, again, the ordinary mantilla. So why is this very most powerful? She was very well known. She was terribly wealthy. And it is the most extraordinary dress. But what is so extraordinary is look at her hand. You can't see it in great detail, sadly. But on her finger, on one finger, she's got a diamond ring from her husband. And on the other finger, she has a gold ring which says Goya on it. And she's pointing down onto the floor. And it says, only Goya. And so there's a great deal of discussion about whether or not she was having an affair with Goya. Now, this is a bit unlikely because before this, well before this, Goya had come out of fashion because he got very, very deaf. I mean, entirely deaf. They don't know why he got deaf, but he took himself out of society and he put himself into that house and he painted pictures that were never meant to be seen, the black Goyas at that time. And this particular painting was painted just at the time when he was already deaf and a relatively old man. So there's big discussion about why they should say only Goya, but it is really one of the greatest reasons. And this particular picture, he was very, very proud to actually own this one. I mean, Huntington. Okay, next one. But the one that is lovely, this is lovely. Now we had a young friend, went with a friend, and he couldn't tear himself away from it. And this man is called Pedro McCarthy. But why it's interesting, he was a great, great friend of Goya's. Now do look at the costume. It appears that both he and Goya were obsessive aficionados for the bullfight. And they had a sort of a smart uniform that they would wear when they went to the bullfight. And this was this sort of rather splendid sort of thing they've got on it here. He was a great, great friend of Goya's, and he was a singer and a musician. And he actually, when this was painted, he lost his voice. And so this is a sad painting. And it was painted in 1805. And it was painted just before Goya was exiled. So really, it's the last Goya we see. And the detail is wonderful. Look at that painting. Isn't it extraordinary? And of course, we're looking at the Romantic period now. It's so wonderful. Now, the next one we're going to see is a Mexican painter. And he's called Jose Augustus Ariarte. And he was born in 1803 and he died in 1870. But what is interesting, the painting is called The Young Man from the Coast of 1813. And what is fascinating, it's the area of the largest Afro-Hispanic Spaniard collection of people. And this one is that painting is of an African Spaniard with those marvelous things. And on the right, which isn't in the exhibition, but I found it because it's a rather nice one. It's a peasant girl of 1845. This one is 43. They're painted at the same time. And these are he was a local successful painter. He painted genre scenes, really. Okay, next one. But now we're looking at the pictures, the last pictures, really, that Huntington bought. He stopped buying paintings around about 1909. At this point, you know, Soraya was doing this great mural. And this particular one is by a man called Mariano Fortuny. And he was a Spanish painter. He was born in 1835 and he died in Rome in 1874. And he was a sort of a war painter. He painted war scenes. And this particular one is one of the wars between the Spaniards and the Africans. And this is the Arabs ascending, the Arabs who are prisoners are ascending a hill in 1864. And he traveled to Morocco, so he knew what he was painting. He looked actually what he was doing. Isn't it? It's the use of captives. It's a large painting. And the next one is the most I don't like it, but this man is called Ignacio Zulaga. This is one of purchased by Huntington. And it's a family of the gypsy bullfighter, probably, but the story isn't really a family, because if you remember, Sargent was painting the gypsy bullfighters at the same time. And this one is this particular one. And it's the mother, of course, the young man, the bullfighter here, his wife and family. And the reason I've put the one on the right is because I remembered the name. It's the same painter. He's called Zulaga. And this particular bullfighter is Domino Ortega. Do you remember there was a scandal with, suddenly can't remember her name, something with the film star, you know, the one that was married to Orson Welles. Rita Hayworth.
Rita Hayworth.
She had an affair with him. There was a sort of, I remember this. And this particular picture was painted in 1945, and it would be at the time of the affair. So I thought that was quite fun when I found that one. And he's, of course, he's a matador, and he's in the uniform. Same man. Okay, next one. Now, the next one I didn't like at all, but everybody else thinks is lovely. So I let you decide yourself. He's called Calamarasa, and it's the girl, the Bernese girls. They're in costume for the thing, traditional Spanish costume. And this particular one is 1910, 1911. This is when he really stopped buying. Now we're going to look at Soraya. Okay, next one. Well, not quite. This is another Mexican painter. This particular man was a Mexican painter, and he was a Jerez, and this is these are his family of painters wearing traditional costume, and this showed. They say it was painted to show the mixture of color in Mexico. Whether it was true or not, I don't know, but this is what they say. Okay, next one. And this one is one of the only genre picture really here. And he's called Solano, Jose Gutierrez Serrano. And this is the mariners of the Caso Udalias. And this is the poor sailors. It's a big painting. It's quite nice. It looks like German expressionism, really. Mm. And in the final room,
did you mention the three different?
No, I didn't. I should have done. Go back to that, darling, because I'm not good at that. Go back to the one before. Okay,
Oh, so this is
it's about,
this was one of the more interesting ones that we were discussing, because it had depictions of First Nations, but then also the consequence of First Nation,
intermarriage.
exactly, intermarriage between colonizer and the kind of Native Americans that were already there. And so you have, but the title also gives a lot away, because
It's called
the titling is also
Castos
derogatory.
Mestos,
The
Castos Mestos.
the castos mestizos, so it's like the mixed castes, and so you have the father and the mother. So the mother is a pure First Nation of Central American origin, so she would have been a Mexican, I guess, Indian, and then the father has paler skin and is mestizo. So the father already has sort of mixed bloods in him, and then the child is called a coyote, which is a derogatory term, and so because the child is kind of like a mixture of the two.
They call it Spanish Negro, but mulatto. Do they call it mulatto or something?
But that was more with the mixing of Bahamian, Barbadian, Cuban,
Okay.
because the darker skin with the white colonizer.
I
So those were mulatto, but mulatto as well was a derogatory
So it's an unusual picture.
term.
He died in 1728, so this particular
It's
picture.
kind of hard to decide what exactly the picture is saying, really.
Well, I mean, I thought, I wasn't certain it was a woman in the center, but you told me. It
No,
was.
yeah, this is the mother.
No.
The mother.
Now, this one is the only time we see any example of this enormous mural that he did. Now, when he worked incredibly hard on this mural, and these are the sketches, and they're pretty rare. They're very exciting to see them because they are the first ideas. He worked on them, so I worked on them from 1912 to 1923. And these you can see in the exhibition. There's a room full of them. Okay, next one, because I want to show you these pictures. Now, these are in the exhibition, and this is Sorolla at his best. Now, basically, he's passionate about light. He was spending particularly sunlight. He's a light painter. Now, I managed to throw away what I was sitting on them, because I carefully had this. Where did I do with it? Oh dear. Oh, well, I can't do it. I can't find it now.
What were you doing?
Well, it was a review by Lauren Cummings about him, which was quite interesting.
Laura Cummings would have been The Guardian.
The Guardian, yes, she was, which was talking about them. Now, these are absolutely beautiful in this particular way. Particularly look at the brush stroke. It's quite amazing, and they really are extraordinary. This particular one is called Sea Idyll. This is 1908, and the one is After the Bathe of also 1908. Now, when they talk about him, they say he was looking at Botticelli. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. But he lived very close to the sea. And the next one shows you his museum. Now, there's some talk of us going, because I've never seen it, and it must be quite wonderful. It's in Madrid, and this is his house. This is Sorolla's house. And when he died in 1923, his wife died 25, and she gave it to the nation. Now, it's not only the house that is beautiful, but the garden is based on the Alhambra garden. It's not very big, and as you see, it's there. It really is quite. She gave it to the Spanish government in 1925, and there's 100 paintings in it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Now we're just going to briefly show you some Sorolla pictures. This is a very early one. This is very early work. It's showing the sale of 1896. He's a very sunny painter. He only does really one painting, which I didn't manage to get a slide of sort of crippled children going into the sea. All his painting is about light and life. Okay, next one. These, I think, are marvelous. He spent, when he came to America in 1909, he lived in New York, on a New York hotel. And these are looking out of the window of a New York hotel, and I think they're marvelous. They're Fifth Avenue in 1911, actually I said 1909, but they're 1911, and they are lovely. Now, the one next is caused an enormous carry-on, because this is Louis Comfort Tiffany, and he commissioned it. And this is Comfort Tiffany's house in Long Island. And it was so, when Tiffany died, this is incidentally one of the Fifth Avenue pictures, but this particular one, when he died, his granddaughter wasn't interested in the picture, and so she sold it. And at the time, the Huntington Group were able to buy it because it was very cheap. And they were saying, actually, and there's an article about it, and they were saying, of course, that the Tiffany thing would go mad to get it back. It's an extraordinary picture. It's absolutely full of flowers. And it's a lovely one. Okay, that's in the picture. And this is lovely. This is running along the beach in Valencia of 1908. And as I say, they're pictures actually about life and having a good time. And this is literally not anything that anybody's
It's sort
into.
of weird having just seen so many like examples of colonialism and teeth being torn out and whatnot. So
okay, next one. Yes,
bizarre
now
coupling.
this, I think, it's a walk on the beach. It's his wife and daughter, and on the right it's Sargent. I thought it was interesting for you to compare these two. Of course, it's our Sargent. It's in the Tate. It's Carnation, Lily Rose. This is a bit earlier. It's 1890, and the other one is 1909. But they liked each other. They liked each other's work, and they exchanged pictures, he and Sargent. But I want you particularly to look carefully at the paint quality of Soila, because it's quite remarkable. Look at this one. I think this girl dancing, skipping is lovely. Again, it's 1909. It's called the skipping rope. He went off, but the one I think is interesting, you'd like this one. This is Sargent again, and it's just called The Friends, but it's Monet and his wife. It's Monet painting in his garden in the 1890s. Isn't that charming? And I thought it was interesting to compare. And here he is, a photograph of him working with the children on the beach. And this is a self-portrait of 1909. A very interesting. He was terribly popular. He painted the President of the United States whilst he was here. And, you know, I gather that he's still known in Spain, but virtually until this recent exhibition, Europe and America have completely forgotten him. Okay, I think that's it.